Let's begin. We are on page 21B3. 21B2. Okay. So the last thing that we discussed was the idea that alongside this, the idea of reading Sefer Torah in the way that we mentioned in the Mishnah, there's also an idea that a person has to read 10 sentences, 10 pesukim from the Torah, in order for those pesukim to count as a proper reading. Now the Gemara is mentioning why, and now that we've said why, 3 different reasons why 10 corresponds to the 10 batlanim, 10 corresponds to the 10 hallelujahs, 10 corresponds to the 10 how do you call it? To the Aseret Dibrot. So we have a bunch of different reasons why what 10 represents. And now the Gemara is now going to carry on and explain how do we divide that 10. It says the Gemara as follows: Amar Rava, Rishon shekara dal mishubach, Sheni shekara dal mishubach, Shelishi shekara dal mishubach. Each one of these cases, if you have someone reading the 4, because remember, 10 divided by 3 is 3, 3, and 4. So one of them is going to have an obligation to read the 4th one. So if either the first person or the second person or the third person read the fourth pasuk to round it out to 10, halacha is that's all mishubach, that's all very good. The Gemara continues and says, where do you know this from? How do you know? Maybe it's ideal that the first person should do it or that the last person should do it. The Gemara now is going to prove, strangely, the idea that the first person or the first idea in something has a preferential treatment, or the second or the middle one or the final one. The Gemara says, Rishon shekara dal mishubach. Where do we know that from? B'shalosh kupot shel shalosh sa'in sheben tormint halishka. They used to put in money into this room. Lishka literally means a room. So they had a room in the Beit HaMikdash that was filled with money. And the purpose of that money was to be able to buy the korbanot, the sacrifices that were going to be used for the Beit HaMikdash. So 3 times a year, they would take out 3 basketfuls of money, of coins. And what were the coins made up of? They were made up of half of a shekel. Okay, how much was each basket? The Mishnah said each one was made up of 3 sa'ah. So a total of 9 sa'ah of silver coins. Says the Gemara, and on each of these baskets it said Aleph Bet Gimel. What's the reason why you had to write the letters on each one of the baskets? And the Mishnah says, in order to know which one of these 3 baskets was the first one that was pulled from the root, and that's the one that we should pull from. So you see, the ideal is to use the first one. So first is the best. That's the idea. Okay? Gemara now continues and says, okay, well, if you told me that the second person could read the 4, that means that there's also a preference to the middle one. Gemara says, how do we know? Because it says, to the middle of the menorah, the candles are lit. Just to be clear, a menorah in the Beit HaMikdash does not look like the menorah that we have and we light on Chanukah. On Chanukah, the menorah has 4 candles on each side of the middle stem. So you have 8 different branches of the menorah. However, in the menorah of the Torah, there are not 8 branches, there are 7 branches. And the middle one is the shamosh, okay? So that middle candle, so to speak, the one that we normally would associate with the shamosh, but in the candles of the Beit HaMikdash was one of the actual candles of the 7, still has it's playing its own game. That middle lamp, that middle candle is called the Ner Ma'aravi, the western light. And why is it called west? Just if you can imagine, the Beit HaMikdash is like a long rectangle. There's the entrance point in the front. That's the beginning of the Kodesh. You walk through the Kodesh and you get to the back, and the back is the Kodesh HaKodashim. Where was the Kodesh HaKodashim? The Kodesh HaKodashim was west. The entrance point is in the east, okay? So therefore, the candles to the right is north and to the left is south. So the menorah was placed perpendicular to the entrance. It was placed parallel to the entrance and the Kodesh HaKodashim. So it's lined up across the short part of the Beit HaMikdash, meaning that the middle candle, which is the Ner Ma'aravi, why is it called the Western candle? It's called the Western candle because the wick in the cup was facing the west. So just as an example, let's say you have, this is let's say just as an example, this is the cup of the menorah. That way is west, this way is east, that way is north and south. So the middle candle is, the wick would actually be placed coming out on that side, facing the Kodesh HaKodashim. So that's why it's called Ner Ma'aravi. All the other candles, so the three on this side and three on this side, this one stays west, but the three on this side are facing that way, because remember, if that's west and that's east, so where's north? Right, north is there. So sorry, these would be facing south, and these would be facing north. So that the candles are el mul pnei menorah. They're, all of them are aimed in towards the middle one, and the middle one is actually aimed towards the west, towards the Kodesh HaKodashim. So why are we bringing this up? So you see this idea that there's a preference and a focus on the middle of the menorah. So therefore, you see again that when you have three readers, and one of them is going to have to get the majority, the better portion, the 4 instead of the 3. So we saw before that it could be the first one because of the preference of the first basket to bring the korbanot from. Now we're going to say that there's also a separate preference on the middle one, because the middle candle is the one that all the candles are facing, and therefore you see that the middle one is also has a preference. So let's just read the Gemara inside the Tanya, because the Braita says, the pasuk says that they should shine towards the face of the menorah. We learned that you tilt the wicks towards the candle, the Ner Maravi, which is the western wick, which is the middle one facing the west. And the western one is facing the Shekhinah, which is in the Kodesh HaKodashim. The Rabbi Yochanan says, "Mikan shemtzai mishubach." We see from here that the middle one is mishubach, is praiseworthy. Okay, so therefore, in a scenario where you have 3 readers, the middle one could also take the 4, which is the choicest portion of the Pesukim, because it has the majority of the 10. The Gemara says, okay, so now what about the last one? You're going to tell me the last one? Why should the last one get it? Gemara answers, same idea. Why? What's special about the last one? Where do we see that preferential treatment is given to the last one? 21b3 at the bottom. Okay. Gemara says, because we have a general rule in all of Judaism. Ma'alim b'kodesh, you always go up in sanctity and in kedusha, and you never go down. Okay, so ma'alim b'kodesh v'lo moridin. In fact, when you talk about the lights of the nerot of Chanukah, one of the reasons why we light 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5 instead of 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 like Bet Shammai is because ma'alim b'kodesh v'lo moridin. We go up in holiness and we don't go down. So therefore, if you have 3 readers, when would the highest point of holiness be according to that logic? It would be the third one, and therefore the third one can read the 4 portions in his portion. Rav Papa the Rav Papa one time came to a certain synagogue, and the first person read 4 pesukim. Rav Papa gave him accolades. He praised him for what he had done for doing it. Now, obviously, the question is, we just got finished saying that the second guy, if he did it, is praised, and the third guy, if he did it, is praised. So basically, you're going to praise everyone no matter what. So what is the Gemara telling us that Rav Papa praised him? Not to tell you that Rav Papa was saying you're Mishubach, because if the second guy took it, it would also be Mishubach. What he was saying is that even though you could have left it to the second guy, or you could have left it to the third guy, and that would have been appropriate. It wouldn't have been inappropriate. But the fact that you chose to do it first indicates that there's a desire on your part to be able to do the mitzvah as quickly as possible immediately. Gemara continues, we discussed that on days that are work days, we do not go less than that amount, but also v'en mosifin, and you do not add on to the blessings. So 3 on Monday and Thursday and Shabbat afternoon. We don't want to go extra on Shabbat afternoon, even though it's not a work day, because it's difficult. They've been learning all day on Shabbat afternoon. We don't want to add to that. Then the Gemara said, what about Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed? Rosh Chodesh, Chol HaMoed. Also, you can't go less aliyot than 4, and you can't go more aliyot than 4. Why can't you go more aliyot than? You can't go less because that's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to do 4. You can't go more. Why can't you go more? Because it's also a quasi work day those days. That's the Gemara answer. How about the days that are not work days? On that, the Mishnah says, and pochatin, you can't go less, but you can go more because there's no reason why the people can't have any more aliyot. Says the Gemara. En pochatin ve'en mosifim. Tana, we learned right. Hapoteach mevarech lefanea. The one who starts the berachot of the first of the reading, he does the first bracha. Ve'achoten mevarech lechareh. And the last one, he makes the bracha at the end of it. We already discussed this in the last class. The Gemara says, "Ve'ha'itna," but now the kulu mevarech lefanea lechareh. Everyone has a minhag to make the bracha when you go up to the Torah before you read and after you read. So we don't have the first guy doing the first bracha with no after, the middle guy doing nothing, and the last guy not doing the first but doing the last. That was their minhag. We don't have that minhag. They're already in the time of the Gemara. Gemara says, why? Hainu Tama. The reason is Takin Rabbanan, the Chachamim made everyone make their own bracha. Why? Gzer mishum hanechnasim mishum hayotzin. Why? Because what if someone comes in late or leaves early, so he may misunderstand and think that there's only a bracha before, or that there's only a bracha after. So therefore, in order to make sure that no one makes this mistake, so therefore we obligate a person to make before and after. Now the question is, right? Why would it be that was not a problem before? What changed that suddenly became a problem? Gemara says, "Ve'ha'idna," and now that we have a different custom, well, why do we have a different custom? Why, if this was the way it is, if that's the way it is now, that we're worried that someone might come in the middle and then make a mistake in terms of understanding what's supposed to happen, then why would that not have occurred then? So a different way of understanding the Gemara is that the Gemara says, no, that's not the point. Ve'ha'idna, now that we're more lazy with tefillah, used to be there was such a premium placed on tefillah. They would come in an hour before. Some of them would stay an hour after. Just engaged in the process of tefillah. Now the people come in when they want, they leave when they want. So now we're worried that they might miss it and they might have that misconception. However, a different way of understanding it is not that there's a misconception that we're worried about. We're worried about the fact that the guy comes late, he didn't get the pre bracha of Torah, and if he leaves early, he doesn't get the after bracha of Torah. Okay, Gemara continues. We said already that on Rosh Chodesh and on Chol HaMoed, the halacha is that everybody gets that we always read 4 odim. Ula, the son of Rav, asked the question to Rava, Parashat Rosh Chodesh ketzal korinota. When you read Parashat Rosh Chodesh, how are you supposed to read it? How do we divide that parasha amongst 4 different people? Gemara is trying to explain what the problem is. Let's look at the Pesukim. Tzav et bnei Yisrael, et korbanei lachmi liishai, dehavin tmanya Pesukim. It has exactly 9 Pesukim, right? Hechina avid. What are we going to do? How could you divide that? Right? Tmanya is, 8. We have 8 Pesukim. How are you going to divide 8 Pesukim if you have 4 people? Nikri tre, tlata Pesukim. If we have 2 people read, each one of them gets 3, okay? Pashulhu, today you still have 2 more. And you don't leave over in a parasha undone pachot mishlosha pesukim. We have this idea that if there's less than 3 pesukim, you don't leave that parasha undone, right? Because it's you're opening yourself up to the misconception that someone thinks, oh, okay, the next aliyah is going to be only until the end of the chapter, in which case they'll learn that you could do an aliyah for 2 pesukim, when we already learned that the minimal amount you could have for an aliyah is at least 3. So therefore, we don't leave over in the end 2 pesukim. So if you have 8 pesukim, your first guy does 3, and the second guy does 3, then what happens? The next guy's left only with 2. So that let's let them read 4 each in that first paragraph. The Gemara says, if that's the case, in the next paragraph, how much do you have? Pashuluhu Shiva. There's only 7 verses left. So again, we're in a situation where there's 4 and 3. Ubiyoma Shabbat havin tre, uroshech chodshechem havin chamisha. So the part that talks about the korban of Shabbat is only 2 pesukim, and the part of Rosh Chodesh is 5. So therefore, what's the problem? What are we going to do? How are we going to break this up? Nikri tre meha v'chad mihanach. Okay, so just read 2 from Shabbat and read 1 of Rosh Chodesh. The Gemara says it doesn't make sense for us to do that. Why? Because the same way you don't end unless there's 3 pesukim, you also don't start unless there's 3 pesukim. So therefore, you can't begin the next paragraph, which is Rosh Chodeshechem on the first day of the month, which is telling you the korbanot of Rosh Chodesh, because you're only going to be reading 1 pasuk into it. To read 2 from this one and 3 from that one. Maybe he'll read 2 from Shabbat, 3 from the last parasha, because you have to read minimum 3. So now how much has he read? 5. Pashulu tre, but then there's only 2 left in the 4th aliyah. The Gemara answers, Amalo, he told him, Zulo Shamati. I don't know. No one ever told me exactly what to do about this. Kiyotze Shamati. However, I heard something else which might be a help for us to understand what to do here. And what is that? The Tanan, we learned, on the first day, what do you read? Now, actually, we already learned this Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit, right? Where we were talking about how the Ma'amadot, they each read a special part when they're supposed to be on their rotation. So what do they read on the first day? Bereshit v'hirakia. On the first day they read Bereshit v'hirakia. V'tani ala, and the Braita says about that Bereshit b'shnaim v'hirakia be'echad. The first paragraph, which is the first 2 pesukim Bereshit, right, is divided by 2 people, okay, because there's enough for 2 people, and then the next one, which is Yehirakia, is read by Echad, with 1 of them. And we asked the question, Bishlama Yehirakia be'echad. Yehirakia you could read with 1. Why? The Tlata Pesuki have it. Because that second portion, Yehirakia, is 3 Pesukim. Ele Bereshit B'Shnayim, how could it be that Bereshit is read by 2 people? Chamisha Pesuke have it. There's only 5 Pesukim. That means that one guy can read 3, but the other guy is left with 2. The Gemara answers, Vitanya, and what do we learn? Hakoreba Torah leloifchot mishilosha pesukim. A person reading the Torah can never read less than 3 pesukim. So what do we do? How are we dividing 5 between 2 people? The itmar ala, and we learned on that answer, what did he say? Rav Amar, doleg. The second reader, what does he do? Doleg means he jumps, or he goes back. Okay? So what does he do? He reads 1 pasuk from the guy before. So the first person reads 3 pesukim. The second guy reads 2 pesukim, but he also starts 1 pasuk prior to where he started before. Shmuel Omer, and Shmuel says, Posek, what does he do? He take the third pasuk, which is, remember, you have 5. So pasuk number 3 is divided into 2 pesukim. The first guy basically has 2.5, and the second guy has 2.5. It's very interesting, right? But at least, he says, at least there's each one of them read not 2 pesukim. The idea of 3 is not to read 2. So if I read 2.5, yani, it's okay. Rav, the Gemara says, okay, so what's the pshat, what's the understanding in the machloket between Rav and Shemuel? Rav Amar Doleg, Rav says, you go back my tama, lo Amar Posek. Why does he not hold like Shemuel? And instead of adding an extra pasuk that we're reading again, why doesn't he like the idea of dividing? And the Gemara answers, Kasavar, he holds. So Rav doesn't say like Shmuel. Kasavar, he holds, Kol psuka de lo paske Moshe, anan lo paskin. If Moshe did not have a pasuk in his Torah, then we can't make up a new pasuk, i.e., cut a pasuk in half and make it as if it's a new pasuk. So therefore, if Moshe did not have that pasuk in his Torah, we can't read half a pasuk. That's what Rav holds. Shmuel Amar Paskinan, and Shmuel says you divide it. How could that be? Rav Chananya, who was the person in charge of Kira Pesukim, he said, Tzar Gadol Hayali, Etzer Rabbi Chanina Gadol. I had a lot of pain. It was very difficult for me by Rav Chanina Hagadol. Okay, He did not allow me to divide the pasuk the way I wanted to. Only for children. So since they could not learn the whole pasuk, so he was allowed him to teach half a pasuk by saying half a pasuk and half a pasuk. Hoil v'litlamed asuyin. Since the whole purpose of saying it was in order to teach it, so I wasn't really breaking the pasuk in half. I was rather teaching a whole pasuk in two parts. Okay. So if that's the case, that Rabbi Chanina Kra had Shmuel on his case that he didn't let him divide a pasuk for any other reason other than to teach it to children, so clearly he didn't let him do it any other time. So how could it be that Shmuel would hold that for the reading of the Ma'amadot, they would divide the psukim? It has to read 2.5 and 2.5. The Gemara answers, Hatam over there, time my. Why is it that when it came to the school children, Rabbi Chanina Kra got the go-ahead, the green light from Shmuel, Mishum de lo efshar, because there was no other way. If he taught them the whole pasuk, they would get mixed up. So therefore, Shmuel allowed him to do so. Achanami over here too, lo efshar. There's no other possibility because you have to have the aliyot. You have to have these aliyot, and you have the pesukim are divided in a way where there is no other way around it. So therefore, it will be allowed to read half a pasuk because there is no other way around it. It actually goes back to what we learned the other week, where we said en danin efshar mi efshar. We don't learn something which is possible from something which is not possible. So in that case, there was no other possibility. So therefore, we allowed you to read half of the pasuk. Now, what do you mean? It's impossible. It is possible. All you have to do is do what Rav did. What did Rav do? He had them, Shmuel broken in half. What was Rav's solution? Have the first guy read 3 pesukim, then the second guy, who only has 2 pesukim left, just goes back to this pasuk. So he skips back 1 pasuk. Why doesn't Shmuel hold like Rav, and then he doesn't have to come onto this clearly non-ideal scenario? Gemara says Shmuel Amar. Shmuel says, "Posek my time doleg." Why doesn't he say he should go back? Simple answer. The Gemara says, "Gezerah." It was a gezerah they made, they instituted a rule. Mishum anichnasim, mishum yotzim, because people who come and people who go in the synagogue, right? And if someone he walked into the synagogue and he saw that the second guy was reading from the 3rd verse. How many pesukim are before that 3rd verse? 2. So again, we have this guy learning an erroneous halacha that you're allowed to have an aliyah that consists of 2 pesukim. So therefore, because of that gezerah, Shmuel felt that what are you going to learn? You're going to learn, you're going to have an alternate solution, and therefore Shmuel suggests this alternate solution, which is to read 2.5 pesukim. Okay, Gemara continues. Metve, the Gemara asked a question on what we just said. Parasha shisha pesukim koriyota b'shnayim. If you have a parasha, a paragraph that has 6 pesukim, easy, divided by 2. V'shel chamisha, and if you have 5 in the chapter, pesukim biyachid. The first person reads 3. Asheni kore shenayim miparasha zu ve'echad miparasha acheret. The second guy, what does he do? He reads the remaining 2 pesukim in that chapter, and then he reads the next verse from the next chapter. Ve'echad miparasha acheret. V'yesh omrim shelosha, and some people say the second person should read 3 pesukim in the next parasha. Lefi she'en matchilim parasha echad mishelosha pesukim. You can't do less than 3 pesukim, because again, we're worried the guy will come in. He'll see that the chapter started and you're only 2 verses in. He'll think that you could do an aliyah for 2 pesukim. But be that as it may, the Mishnah over here that we just quoted brought that either the second guy could read 2 and 1, or that the second guy reads 2 and 3. Neither Rav, who says that you skip, right, nor Shmuel that says that you half, is the Mishnah going like. The Gemara says, "V'mita," and if that's true, leman dama doleg nidlog. According to Rav, you should just go back. Why is the Braita telling you what we just said? And according to leman dama posek, and according to Shmuel, it's also hard to understand because the Braita is also not going like him, because it didn't suggest his idea of splitting the 3rd verse in half. The Gemara answers, Shani hatam, the Braita that suggested this idea is different. De efshar behachi, because it was a possible It gave you a situation where it was possible to read from the next paragraph, okay, and with this approach, and not therefore we're not necessary to come on to the solution of Rav and Shmuel, okay. So since, as an example, on Monday and Thursday, the halakha is that you can read really any chapter because it's all considered part of the reading because it's only a portion of Shabbat. So therefore, Rav and Shmuel, when they said their solution, they were talking about a situation where it was impossible to come up with any other solution. So Rav said, in an impossible case, what do? You go back one. Shmuel says, no, in an impossible case, what do? You split the third pasuk in half. The Gemara says, okay, if that's the case, Amar of Tanchum, Amar, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, halakha ki yesh umim. The halakha is, how do we go? When you read two, and then you have the next one, the next one is the next paragraph. So what do? You read two, and then you read three in the next parasha. Halakha ki yesh umrim, because we do not hold that a person should be reading one pasuk from a paragraph from the next paragraph. Oh, well, anyway, less than three from the next paragraph. Gemara continues and says, "Ve'amar Rabbi Tanchum Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi." Rav Tanchum said the name of Yeshua ben Levi, "Kishem she'en matchilim beparasha pachot migimel pesukim." Just like we don't read into a new paragraph 3 pesukim, because we're worried someone may think that you're allowed to read two. Kach in mishayrim parasha pachot mishusha pesukim, like we saw earlier. You also can't end off with less than 2 pesukim. In the parasha before the end, okay? As we already explained, why what was the reason why you can't leave over extra pesukim? Yeah, why is that a problem? No, that's when you're splitting it. That's when you're splitting it. But why can't I leave over to the end? That it's less than it is? Or... 1 second here, 1 second. I'm just trying to find where we saw it before. This is in the last sugya. Okay, so we'll come back to it in just a minute. Okay, the en mishayrin. What the problem is with en mishayrin, because we had it earlier before we got there. Okay.
If you end before, leaving unread.
Sorry.
Saying, what was the question that your
why? Right. We said earlier that one who leaves if there's less pesukim left over.
Just leave them.
No, you can't leave less than 3 at the end. Right? Okay, we'll come we'll see it soon. The Gemara is actually we're gonna come back to it. Okay, on the next page. Okay, but either way, the Gemara. But I just wanted to find where we said it before, and it was before the sugya. Okay, so but it's on Daf Chafal. So the Gemara says, okay, the same way you can't do it one way, you also can't end less than in the before. The Gemara says, okay, so what's the reason? Pshita. Why do you need this extra bit? If when it comes to the beginning of the paragraph and you're reading less than 3 pesukim, the Tanna Kama said, right, it's okay. Because remember, the Tanna Kama held that you could read 2 and 1. That means that he doesn't mind, according to the Tanna Kama, that you only read 1 pasuk into the new parasha. Right? Shiur de machmir Tanakama lo kol sheken de machmire yesh omrim. So if the Tanakama also says, right, that does not allow you to end off less than 3 pesukim left in the parasha. So if the Tanakama, if when the Tanakama was lenient, the other opinion was strict, for sure when the Tanakama is strict, the other opinion is going to be strict. So therefore, it's obviously going to be that they would be machmir. So what's Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi coming along and explaining to us this halakha according to that opinion that is stricter? The Gemara answers, we would not have been able to understand that you do not end before from the fact that you do not start unless there's three. Maybe the reason is we're worried that late people coming late to shul is something that happens all the time. Yotzin lo shchichi. People to leave the synagogue early is less of a normal thing. And I'll give you an example. Come to synagogue any week. You're there right in the beginning. How many people are there? Almost nobody, right? How many people leave the synagogue before the end of prayers? There's a few, but not as many as don't come on time. So the Gemara is asking very, 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 very straight, right? So, I might have thought that what we're worried about when someone misses what we started, that's something that we're much more conscious of. Yotzin, but to have someone end less than a certain amount from the end of the paragraph, yotzin lo shchichi. V'manchi sefer Torah v'nafki. They're not going to walk out on the sefer Torah in the middle of the reading. So remember, what was the problem that we said earlier? Let's say the guy sees that there's only 2 verses left till the end of the chapter. The guy says, "Oh, obviously they're going to end at the end of the chapter. If there's only 2 verses left, you're allowed to read less than 2 verses." The same idea, remember? So he said, if the person is strict on the coming in, then they're going to be strict on the going out. The Gemara says, no. The reason why he needed to tell us this is because you might have thought that we only made the gezerah for nichnasim, but not for yotzim, kamash malan. The Rav Yoshua ben Levi explains, no. If we're worried about people leaving early, we're also if we're worried about people coming late, we're also worried about people leaving early, and therefore he's makpid on both of them. Okay? V'tana kama, and the first opinion, Maishna shiuri de lo, right? The Tanakama, remember, he said you could read 2 verses and then just read 1, and no problem that that you're 1 in and not 3 into the new thing. Tanakama Mashna shiuri de lo. How come he's not worried about reading 3 into a paragraph? What's the reason that we're worried? What's the difference between leaving something which is not read and reading into mishum yotzin, because of the people that are going to leave in the middle of the Torah? Atchule nami gzera mishum anichnasin. So if we're worried about people that might leave, and therefore the Tanakama doesn't allow you to do that, we also should have the same problem when you began a paragraph and you only read 1, right? Because of nichnasim. They walk in. What do they see? You only read 1 pasuk in the new paragraph. What do they think? You read only 1 pasuk. So if Tanakama, you're worried about the people that are leaving early, right? Why are you not worried about the people that are coming late? The Gemara answers, Amri man da'ayil shiule shayil. When someone walks into the synagogue and they have a question, what are they going to do? They'll turn to their neighbor and say, the guy just read 1 pasuk? The guy will tell him, no, he read 2 pasukim before. That's why he has 3. But when the guy walks out, there's nobody to ask.
He shouldn't leave.
So he makes assumptions. So we're worried about the leaver. Why? Because the leaver has nobody to ask. But the guy who comes in late, I'm not worried about, because if he has a problem or a question, he'll ask somebody and they'll tell him that they already started to read those 2 from before. Okay? We'll continue from here, Be'ezrat Hashem, next time. Hazaku Baruch.
Hazaku Baruch.
Yeah. Extra credit, guys. You know that, right?
Yeah.
How do we do this? I'm not sure what I just did.